Good afternoon. This is Shelly Errington speaking. I am professor of anthropology at UC Santa Cruz, and I am associated with the Santa Cruz Faculty Association. I have just listened to Professor Lodha's presentation about the post-employment benefits and looked at his slides, and frankly, I'm still puzzled. So Professor Lodha has kindly agreed to answer some of my questions. First of all, I would like to say that A and B are so-called integrated plans. Professor Lodha, you think each one would be detrimental to the University of California's ability to recruit and retain quality faculty and staff. Could you just give us a scenario of what you think would happen if the regents adopted Plan A, and then afterwards I'll ask you about Plan B, the integrated options?
I think option A is going to be detrimental to all employees and all staff, and in fact, it is very detrimental to the University of California as an institution. And the effect will be deep and immediate in its inability to recruit and retain faculty and affecting the morale significantly. And it will be a historical mistake, and therefore, it is my belief that the leaders are likely to in fact stay away from option A because the impact will be immediate and questions will be raised as to why these choices were made.
So you think really option A would be such a poor choice that it would be immediately visible? And you think
Yes.
that therefore it is, you think that people will realize that and not adopt it. What do you think about Plan B? What will be the effects of it, and when will they become apparent?
Option B is also actually quite detrimental. However, the effects are likely to take a little bit longer to take hold of the institution, and the impacts are a little bit hidden. But it will take maybe 5 to 7 years before people start to realize the impact of these options. Right now, there's some hope and expectations that has been raised that the salary, both faculty and staff, may rise at a very rapid rate of 35 to 50% over the next 10 years, which is 3.5 to 5.0%, which I believe is highly unlikely. And as the reality takes hold that the salaries are not rising as rapidly as Social Security covered compensation, and the stratification takes hold of the institution in terms of lower paid employees getting less benefits and the higher income employees getting more benefits in option B, people will also begin to suffer from the morale issues related to option B. But it will take a little bit longer to take hold.
Thank you. Now, I have heard a rumor that the Berkeley Senate is seriously considering saying that option B would be all right. I do not know whether this rumor is correct, and I don't believe that they voted on it, but could you give us your opinion in the event that the Berkeley Senate does not reject out of hand option B, as it is likely that our Senate may well do? Could you speculate, if you wouldn't mind, about why it is that they might adopt option B?
That's a tricky question, Shelley. I think the question will be best answered by the Berkeley Senate and the chair. But my understanding from the discussions that I've had informally with a large number of people is that one of the reasons why option B may be considered acceptable is based on an assumption. And that assumption is that the faculty salaries are going to rise commensurate with the Social Security covered compensation, which is about 35 to 50% over the next 10 years. And then it will keep up pace with not just with the inflation, but with the rise of Social Security covered compensation. However, our data shows that that assumption is unlikely to be met, which is what I already said in the cause for rejecting option B. So my request actually not just to the Berkeley Senate leadership, but any unit which thinks option B is acceptable, is to look at this assumption and see whether the data actually justifies these assumptions. And if they do not rule out option B, they will be doing a service to the community by taking out a statement saying why option B still is acceptable to them.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Now, one of the reasons for the regents and for the University of California Office of the President to consider a new plan in the first place is to save the university money. Tell me, how much do you think it would cost to implement the integrated plan, either A or B?
My belief is that the cost of implementation of integrated plans, either A or B, will be actually very, very significant. There has been some disagreement with some of my colleagues on this, and it is a little bit of a premature discussion. Some people feel that the cost of implementing just the formulas may not be that much of work, which may be true because our slides have already incorporated those formulas. But those formulas depend upon time and change with time. But the real cost will be in the planning of this retirement. So when the people want to begin to think as to which choices they want to make, they would like to assess and project what the retirement benefits will be. And those computations will be very complex, they will be very confusing, and they will be subject to statistical estimate. What that would require is hiring of people in the benefits office who are statistically much highly sophisticatedly trained. So that training will be required, and that will be where a significant cost will be, and the software to actually implement those computations to project what your retirement computations will be in the future, because no single number can be given. They will have to be padded with some deviations estimates associated with the underlying assumptions.
So I take it that estimates in the Gould report and in the PEB task report, there are no estimates, I presume, about how much it might cost to implement it, or are there?
There are no estimates right now as to how much it will cost to implement.
Mm-hmm. So here's another question. Even if an integrated plan, that is to say A and B, integrated with Social Security, did not cost the university very much more to administer than the current plan, I'm confused about something else. That is, how much money would the university save with this plan? I ask that because we all think that plans A and B, the integrated plans, would be highly disruptive and just very bad for recruitment and retention. And so in the name of saving money, they are considering doing something which is highly risky and has not been tested, basically, anyplace. So my question is, what is the cost of these plans compared to the total budget? Am I being clear
think
enough?
I understand your question, and some answers to your questions have been given in the report.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike the age factors and the impact on the pensions, I have not verified these numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to quote what the report says. So if you look on the page 82 of the report, it says that Plan A would save about $20 billion in the next 30 years or so. So what that means is about $200 million per year for the next 30 years. While Plan B would save only $13 billion, which is $6 billion less in the next 30 years. However, on the operating budget, which is in the next 10 years, the impact of either the Plan A or B is going to be about same and rather small. So most of these savings will be realized after 10 years and not in the first 10 years. The report says tier designs A and B have approximately the same effect on the funding gap in early years, covering only around $1.3 billion, which is about $130 million for the next 10 years. In fact, the dissenting statement goes and makes even stronger assertion, saying that options A and B result in the same cost to the operating budget for the years 2011 to 2021. So there is really no difference or very little. And one may wonder, why is that the case? The reason is because even though the university contribution to B is higher, it does not kick in from day one, because the new employees are going to start joining very, very slowly, starting in 2013, and therefore whatever the difference is, which is the contribution is 1.7% difference between option A and option B, that is not going to kick in immediately. It will take a while for that difference to kick in. So the executive report and the summary says there will be some pressures on the operating budget, but it should be minor in the next 10 years.
Okay, so more questions on the costs. I'm confused about something in your slides. In one of your slides, you have written that the long-term costs to the University of California would be for plans A, B, and C, and the present plan, respectively, 11.9%, 13.8%, 15.1%, and 17.6%. What are those percentages of?
Those are percentages of the covered payroll. The covered payroll is about $8 billion. So each percent is about $80 million.
Okay, in that case, I'm confused because although you have written that on your slide as the cost to the university, but those percentages, I think, actually are the contributions of both the employer and the employee. So it's not exactly the cost to the regents and UCOP and the system, is it?
You are absolutely right, Shelly. There is an important distinction there, and you have caught on that very wisely. Those are actually the cost of the plan themselves. And so the question is, and because you see promises those DB plan, that's the cost of the plan. And then the next question is, how is that the cost of the plan shared between the employer and the employee? And if you look at option B and B2 and C, in all three of them, the employer contribution is 9.0%. And the added normal cost contributions or the cost is actually being shared by the employee. So from one perspective, the university should not care as to whether they should offer option B or B2 or even C, because their normal cost is exactly the same.
Mm-hmm. So I guess my final question is, why are we in such a rush right now to adopt something which really turns things on its head, which will not have an effect for several years, if at all, of saving money, and which has been in the works for several years, but which was confidential, in fact, until very recently, but they knew last year that this was being contemplated. But why is it that we are making this huge push to try to figure out which of these incredibly complicated options is the one that we want or least reject?
Well, I think maybe I sense two questions in this. I think there is one sense at the UCOP that it is very hard to sustain the current level of benefits. So they do want to make some changes to the benefits. But the second question, or I think the main question that you asked, is that why are we in such a rush? And frankly, I do not know the answer to this question. I think leaders on both sides, the Senate and the administration, should allow more time to the employees, particularly because the options are really so complex, in order to make informed opinion and decision and provide their input. In the case of furlough, the discussions had actually gone around for a while. The input was provided and taken into account in the final decisions, and it did make some difference. And in this case, I think we are hardly given about a month or so before we can provide meaningful input. It does not make sense to me.
Okay, thank you very, very much for taking the time to do that, Suresh.
Thank you, Shelly. That's it.